Hey guys, and welcome back to day 3 of our planning your best garden ever. If you missed day 1 and 2, I'll have the links below the video, and you want to make sure that you are signed up to get the emails that I'm sending out that have the free worksheets and charts to help you plan all of this, all of it done for you, and additional resources. You can get that at melissaknorris.com/my best garden. Okay, so you have been doing all of your homework. Now, day 3 is the exciting part where you're going to determine how many of each plant you need for your family. So then you can decide which varieties and get all of your seeds ordered and ready to go when it's planting time, which that we're going to cover in video 4. So I have done up for you an extensive chart. And if you've done your worksheet homeworks from the previous 2 days, then you're going to be ready to just plug in and know exactly how much you're going to need to put in of each of these plants for your family. And this is one of the charts that you get in that free download that I know you've went and taken advantage of. So one of the great things is I've done this chart both with fruit and with your vegetables. So it's in alphabetical order, and you're going to go through and it's going to tell you exactly the average number of plants per person for a year's worth of food, what the average yield is per plant, and then average cups per plant. So if you did your homework for our green beans, if on average you are doing 1.5 cups of green beans per week, then you're going to be able to go right to the chart, look at your snap green beans, and you're going to know that average cups per plant is 2 cups on a bush bean. And if you're doing pole beans, which is my favorite variety, I like to get as much harvest off of the little amount of space as possible, you're gonna on average get 3 to 4 cups per pole bean. And so you're gonna easily be able to calculate how many pole beans you need to put in and plant for the year. So all of those numbers are done for you and are in this chart. So now that you have done your assignments and your planning from day 1 and day 2, now it's time for us to begin picking the best varieties and the crops that you're going to be growing. You're going to want to go back to your worksheet from day 1 where you're tracking the fruits and the vegetables that you and your family are eating. And then based on your homework from day 2, so those gardening zones and average frost dates and your warm weather growing period, you're going to be eliminating any crops that aren't going to easily grow in your area. Now, there are different methods that you can use to try to grow different crops. For example, I live in the Pacific Northwest, I'm up in the north, and we are not warm enough to grow citrus here, or okra, or sweet potatoes. Now, I could try some different solarization methods to really heat up my soil and using some different covers to keep things really hot and try to grow sweet potatoes. But honestly, that is just way too much work. I'm much better off focusing my energy on plants that will normally grow well in my gardening area instead of babying things that may or may not produce just because it's not suited to our climate. Now, if you're not sure which crops do grow well or considered warm weather crops that need a lot of heat or crops that are more suited to cold climates, I've got a chart on that in the Family Garden Plan that will help you out. But I'll also, if you're signed up for emails and getting those free worksheets and downloads, give you some additional resources that have those different things listed out. But don't worry, almost all climates are going to have some varieties of crops that you're going to be able to grow in your area. So to have our best garden year ever, we need to make sure that we're picking 1, crops that grow well for our climate, and 2, the specific varieties that are going to grow best for the number of days that we've got that are an ideal growing climate for that crop. So for example, knowing how many days of a warm weather cycle you typically have, as I shared with you, mine is about 150 days. This is really going to help you pick not only once you've determined the type of the crops that you're going to be growing, but knowing which seed variety to pick that's going to give you the best results. So for example, when you are looking at seed packets, oftentimes they will say on the back, they'll give you a specific amount of days to harvest. So this is from when you first plant the seed in the dirt and it sprouts and grows. on average, how many days until it starts to produce a harvest for you. And even within, tomatoes and cucumbers, pretty much all of your crops, there can be a variance based on which variety you pick on how many days for it to come to harvest. So, for example, for me, if I see something that says 50 days when I'm looking at tomatoes versus a different tomato variety that says 75 days, well, I want to pick the one that has the shorter days to harvest so that I've got the max amount of time to be able to harvest it before my cold weather comes in and cuts it short. Now, tomatoes are much longer than 50 days. I've never had a tomato go from seed to produce in 50 days, but that was just an example. You definitely want to look on the individual seed packets. But when you are looking at them and you're trying to decide which type of tomato or cucumber it is that you're going to be buying your seed from, that can be a really good indicator. And oftentimes they'll also say, especially in seed catalogs and different online sources, which don't worry, we're going to talk about that in just a moment, they will say does well in a cool climate or does well in drought conditions. So you're going to want to look for those based upon obviously what your typical weather and your climate is and picking those varieties. Now, the other thing that you want to keep in mind when you're picking varieties is it the type that's going to preserve well? So if you are growing a year's worth of a food, which if you're going through this challenge with me, then that is probably one of your goals. You're going to want to be picking specific varieties that do preserve well. So when we're talking especially cucumbers and tomatoes, there can be a vast difference on the amount that you're going to get and if it's going to preserve well. So for example, when I'm picking out my cucumber varieties, I know that I want a pickling cucumber because we're going to be making a lot of different relishes and pickles, garlic dill. I'm going to be fermenting them. I'm going to be putting them to use. So for me, I love a Chicago pickling cucumber. That one has performed really well for me. It does well with our normally a little bit cooler and wetter summers up here in the Pacific Northwest. It's very prolific. My cucumbers are nice and crisp, which is always our goal. Nobody wants a soggy pickle, right? But the great thing is it's a good pickling cucumber, but it also has great table taste. So I can plant a whole bunch and just do my Chicago pickling cucumber, and I don't need to plant a separate variety for us to eat fresh. For us, it's a dual purpose cucumber. So really important because just your regular English cucumbers, those don't usually lend themselves very well when you're looking to make pickles and doing preserving with them. Now, when we're talking tomatoes, there are so many different tomato varieties. But if you're looking to make salsas and tomato sauce and to can them up, you want to make sure that you're putting in enough tomato plants that are a paste tomato variety. So I still love to do my big heirloom tomatoes that are just delicious. Actually, all I do is heirloom. And we're going to talk about heirloom and hybrid seed here in just a moment. But cherry tomatoes are great. They are full of flavor. They're wonderful on salads just to eat right off the plant. But if you're going to be doing up a whole bunch of salsa and tomato sauce, you do not want to be doing it from all cherry tomatoes. A paste tomato, and the one that I do is a San Marzano Lungo number 2, which is an heirloom tomato. But picking a paste variety, there's Amish paste, Romas, there's a lot of different ones. The San Marzano Lungo happens to be my favorite as far as flavor, and it's very prolific and I get a lot of tomatoes per plant. But you want to pick a paste tomato because they have a meatier flesh. They don't have as much water. So when you go to make your salsa and or your tomato sauce, you're not going to be simmering it as long because there's just not as much water content. It's going to make it faster and you won't have salsa that's as soupy, especially when you're canning it. So making sure that you're picking varieties that are suited to preserving can make a really big difference as well. So these are all things to consider as you're choosing which varieties to get. Now, talking about seed type, we do need to discuss those. So there are heirloom seeds and there are hybrid seeds, and we'll also talk about GMO seeds. But here's what you need to know. Heirloom seeds are open pollinated seeds that have been handed down for many generations. And when you plant them and you seed save from them, they always come back the same as the parent plant. You'll find with heirloom seeds that there's a lot much greater diversity. I myself and many other gardeners feel that heirloom plants actually have more flavor. Like I said, there's purple carrots, there's black tomatoes, there's cranberry beans, different colors, and just fun purple cauliflower, purple potatoes, like so many different varieties that you will never see if you're just sticking to hybrid seeds or you're still going to the grocery store. Though heirloom seeds are becoming even more popular there than what you'll see though buying your produce, if you're buying it from just a regular grocery store shelf, and or your seeds. My family has been seed saving our own strain of heirloom green beans since over 100 years, 5 generations back. And that's another really fun thing about heirloom seeds is they're often named after the region or a family and area where they came from. They just have such a rich heritage and story with them. We grow all heirloom seeds in our garden. Now, hybrid seeds, these came onto the market in about the 1940s. So hybrid seeds are where scientists and different plant companies would go in and they would take the best characteristics of a plant and they would put them together. So it would always be 2 types of green beans or, a tomato and a tomato, and they would pick the part of it that they felt this one was more prolific. So you got a lot bigger yield on it. Maybe it had the other one had a lot more disease resistance. And so they would put that together and create a hybrid seed. The issue, so to speak, with hybrids, there's nothing wrong with hybrid seeds per se, but if you try to seed save from them, oftentimes they revert back to one of the parent plants, so you're not going to get the same type of plant. So if you've ever saved seed from a zucchini or a pumpkin or something like that, and it was a hybrid seed, and then you planted it the next year and it grew something completely different or it tasted really odd, one, it could be a cross-pollination issue, but likely if it was from hybrid seeds, that was the problem. Plus, you have to buy your hybrid seed every year from the store because, as I said, with seed saving, they're not good candidates for seed saving because they keep reverting back to one parent plant and they don't stay true. Now, genetically modified seeds are not the same thing as hybrid seeds. And oftentimes people get that confused. They are completely different. And when you go to the grocery store or online seed catalogs, etc., to the backyard gardener, you're not going to find genetically modified or GMO seeds. But unfortunately, because much of our large farmers and big agriculture is using GMO seeds, especially with crops like corn, and corn has a very vast, it can be in the right conditions, up to a 2-mile cross-pollination. And so it's finding really hard on some of those big crops to find seed that is not contaminated with large GMO crops. So no, you're not going to go to the grocery store and if you buy corn seed, it's not going to be necessarily GMO seed, but we're having a hard time in the US finding ones that have not been cross-contaminated, unfortunately. So GMO seeds are done in a lab. They're relatively new in the past, 10, 20 some years that they've been out and on the public. They are not like the hybrid seed where you've just taken characteristics from the same plant. Instead, they're created in a lab by splicing together and adding in different DNA to the plant. Sometimes it's viruses, sometimes it's bacteria, sometimes it's animal DNA. And statistically, now over 90% of the corn in the US is genetically modified. Now, you can do your own research on if you're fine with GMO crops. Personally, my family and I try to stay away from them as much as possible. And it's one of the reasons that we do an all heirloom seed garden. Now, the great thing about living in this modern age is we have available to us now, probably more than ever, multiple sources to get heirloom seed and great garden seed. And if you are signed up and getting the free worksheets, then you will be getting in the email my favorite sources and where I like to get my seed if you're not seed saving yourself. And hopefully, after going through this and your best garden year ever, you will start to begin doing some seed saving as well. I can't wait to see you in tomorrow's video, where we're going to be going over and helping you plan so you never miss a planting window and you know exactly when to start your seeds and then when to plant them outside. I can't wait to see you in video number 4.